In this class we're going to look at business research methods. Now, first of all, let's start by looking at the meaning of research. It's a search for knowledge. In essence, that's what research is. It is looking for knowledge. It is looking for something which is unknown. A scientific and systematic search for pertinent information on a specific topic. I say a scientific approach. It's as scientific as is possible. Sometimes the researcher is looking for attitudes, people's attitudes towards a product or towards a market situation. It may not be rigorously scientific in the same way as a physicist or a chemist may use in a laboratory situation. But it is a movement from the known to the unknown. We know the situation as it is at the moment. We know the situation we find ourselves in right now. But what we want to know is what else is there that relates to the present situation. We want to discover something which at the moment is unknown. So a businessman, for example, or a businesswoman may want to determine what will happen if he or she cuts the price of the product. Will there be more sales? Or will people's perception of the product change? Will they see the product as an inferior product? The price has fallen, it hasn't got the same status as it had before. So it's a movement from the known. We know what the situation at the moment is, but we want to look at what is likely to arise in the future, and to do that we have to conduct research. So it is a systematic search for pertinent information. It's systematic. It goes about it in an objective manner, or at least as objective as is possible. Now, definitions of research. Well, it's a careful investigation or inquiry, especially through search for new facts in any branch of knowledge. And that's a dictionary definition. It's a good definition. It's a careful investigation or inquiry. And it's conducted especially through search for new facts in any branch of knowledge. So research is possible in any branch of knowledge, not just in business, but in sociology, psychology, physics, chemistry. It's possible in history, in legal studies. Research is what advances our knowledge, and research is important because it moves us along. It gives us more information. It gives us more understanding. So research is very important. Clifford Woody gives this rather long definition. Research comprises defining and redefining problems, formulating hypotheses or suggested solutions, collecting, organizing and evaluating data, making deductions and reaching conclusions, and at last carefully testing the conclusions to determine whether they fit the formulating hypothesis. It's a long definition, but essentially what it's saying is we come up with a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a testable statement. It's a statement that may be researched. So we come up with a hypothesis and then we collect data. We collect information and data and we do some research. And we see if the research, after it's been analysed, after the data has been analysed, if the research confirms or denies the hypothesis. And that's the process of science. That's the process of discovery. That's the process of research in a nutshell. Now, the objectives of research, well, to gain familiarity with a phenomena or to achieve new insights into it, which are exploratory or formulative research studies. So we want to gain familiarity with phenomena and to achieve new insights into the phenomena itself. That's a purpose of research. It's also to portray accurately the characteristics of a particular individual, situation, or a group, which is called descriptive research studies. We want to set out the characteristics of some phenomena or some individual or some group. We might want to set out the characteristics of a business or of an industry. It's descriptive research. It's also to determine the frequency with which something occurs or with which it is associated with something else, which is known as diagnostic research studies. We want to find out how frequent do two things happen together. How frequent is a certain phenomenon observable? So we want to check the frequency with which something happens. It could be to test a hypothesis of a causal relationship between variables, which is hypothesis testing research studies. We might believe that there is a causal connection between a fall in the price of the product and more sales, that these are connected, one's causing the other. We want to check that. We want to see if that is true. It's not just good enough to speculate about it or assume it's right or it seems to make sense and that's good enough. They want to check that there is a connection, a causal connection. One is causing the other. So these are the objectives of research, and we've set out 4 here. Now the types of research, well, we'll start with descriptive versus analytical. Descriptive research includes surveys and fact-finding inquiries of different kinds, including comparative and correlational methods. So descriptive research is trying to find facts that link phenomena together. So you might want to describe a market, describe the processes in the market, describe the company, describe the processes the company goes through, do some research into the business, into the company, and describe the company. That's descriptive research. The major purpose of descriptive research is description of the state of affairs as it exists at the present. So descriptive research normally takes the present situation and describes it. Now this may be a description in words, it may be pictures, it may be sounds, it may be a variety of sources of information brought together which describes, let's say, the company or describes the phenomenon. If it's not business research, it could be descriptive in another area, but it will use the same approach, describing. The main characteristics of this method is that the researcher has no control over the variables. He or she can only report what has happened or what is happening. For example, frequency of shopping, preferences of people, or similar data. So with descriptive research, the researcher reports what is. The researcher does not have any influence over what is. The researcher must be honest and report what is happening. What is the situation? But the researcher cannot influence or change or modify any of the observations. In analytical research, the researcher has to use facts of information already available and analyze these to make the critical evaluation of the material. So analytical research takes the facts. The facts are the facts. The facts can't be changed. So the researcher takes the facts but then analyzes the facts. to find insights from the facts. So if it's a set of data, say about consumer behavior, the researcher would look at the set of data and attempt to work out trends or work out patterns, to analyze the data, in other words, using perhaps statistical techniques or some sort of quantitative technique. Applied research aims at finding a solution for an immediate problem facing a society or an industry or a business organization, whereas fundamental research is mainly concerned with generalizations and with the formulation of a theory. So there is a big distinction between applied and fundamental research. Applied research is trying to find a solution to a problem, whereas fundamental research is looking at generalizations with the idea of formulating a theory. So fundamental research tends to happen at universities in, let's say, in the sciences, where researchers are looking to develop a new theory, a theory in physics perhaps. Try to find out the relationship between particles. Whereas applied research is trying to solve a problem. So, big distinction between applied and fundamental research. Gathering knowledge for knowledge's sake is termed as a pure or basic research. It's pure research. It's just people who want knowledge for knowledge's sake. Many theories in mathematics. They're very important because they give us greater insight into mathematics and into mathematical reasoning. But they are there for knowledge's sake. They are not solving a problem. They are specifying relationships and showing relationships in sequence of numbers or in certain quantities or in sets or in whatever. And it's there for knowledge's sake. It's not orientated towards solving a problem. Research concerning some natural phenomena or relating to pure mathematics, making generalizations about human behavior. These are examples of fundamental research. As I said, in mathematics, it's gathering information for information's sake. But we also have the construction of models in the social sciences. Say, models of urban growth, models of the city. They help us to try and understand the city, but they're not aimed at solving a problem. They are aimed at explaining how cities have developed, perhaps. And there are many theories in economics and in sociology and psychology, in many disciplines that are really exploring ideas. They're not aimed at solving a problem. They're giving us greater insight, but they're not aimed at solving a problem. Research to identify social, economic, political or business trends that may affect a particular institution, or the marketing research or evaluation of research. Now that's applied. If it's research looking at particular social, economic, political trends that affect, say, a business or affect a market or affect consumers, if it's looking at the impact of some change in government behavior perhaps on a market, that's applied. It's applied research. It's looking at the effects of a change in government policy on some market. That's an example of applied research. So applied research is trying to solve a problem. Fundamental research is adding to our knowledge. We've also got quantitative and qualitative research. Quantitative research is based on the measurement of quantity or amount. It's applicable to phenomena that can be expressed in terms of quantity. And not everything can be expressed in terms of quantity. There are many important variables, if you like, or important phenomena that can't be quantified. Aesthetics, art, music, many areas that are important to the human condition but which cannot be quantified. Doesn't mean that they're not important, it just means that they can't be quantified. Qualitative research is concerned with qualitative phenomena, phenomena relating to or involving quality or kind. So qualitative research may ask people if they prefer something to something else, and how much do they prefer it. Did they prefer it a lot or a little? So it's looking at quality. It's looking at their feelings about particular phenomena. It's not measuring, it's looking at their feelings towards that phenomena. Qualitative research aims at discovering the underlying motives and desires using in-depth interviews for the purpose. I say in-depth interviews, but there are various ways, but that's a fairly good way of trying to find out what is it that motivates people in certain ways. How do people feel about particular situations? How do people feel about government policy towards something? How do people feel about certain trends in society? So the way to do that is to interview them and to probe their feelings about that situation. Qualitative research is especially important in the behavioral sciences, where the aim is to discover the underlying motives of human behavior. It's important to understand why people behave the way they do. And it's qualitative research that attempts to do this. It's qualitative research that attempts to explain people's motivations and the way people act and react in certain situations. And that's important. It's important to try and understand the forces that are in play in society. Techniques used in qualitative research are word association tests, sentence completion tests, story completion tests, and similar other projective techniques. Psychologists are very good at developing techniques in this area, but sometimes, for example, respondents may be given a short scenario, a short story, and asked to complete the story, which would be an indication of how they would see something occurring, how they would see a situation working itself out. And in that way, the researcher gains an insight into those people's feelings and their emotions and the way they think about certain situations. For example of qualitative research, well, motivation research, attitude or opinion research about a particular subject or institution, etc. Looking at motivations, looking at attitudes. Now there are scales that are used to try and pick up strength of feelings. One famous one called the Likert scale attempts to judge whether people strongly agree, or neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. And it's a 5-point scale. So people's attitudes are picked up on 5 points. Some strongly agree, some strongly disagree. But then the use of that scale to go on to add and get an overall picture can be misleading. Sometimes the strength of feelings are such that they cannot be added together. If I strongly disagree and you strongly disagree, then between us, does that mean we both very strongly disagree? Because maybe you disagree, but you're not that pushed, you're not that worried. You strongly disagree, but you're not going to do very much about it. I strongly disagree, but I'm very motivated to stop whatever is happening. So we can't just add the strengths of feelings together. So we have the quantitative and qualitative research techniques, and this is the situation that we've just discussed. Right, so let's move to conceptual and empirical. Empirical means done by experiment. In other words, practical research. And we've got conceptual research. Conceptual research is that relating to some abstract idea or theory. Now, philosophy is a very good example of this. Philosophers are prone to look at very abstract ideas. These are not ideas that are practical in the world in which we live, but they're important ideas because we want people to explore ideas and explore the implications of ideas. But they're not directly related to the predicament we find ourselves in, perhaps at the moment. So generally used by philosophers and thinkers to develop new concepts or to reinterpret existing ones. On the other hand, empirical research relies on experience or observation alone, often without due regard for system and theory. So empirical is testing. It's looking at the relationship between two phenomena and trying to test the relationship, trying to look at what's causing what and how does it work. So sometimes the empirical researchers are not really that interested in the theory or not really that interested in the background. They're interested in what's causing what. So it's much more, if you like, practical. It is data based on research capable of being verified by observations or experiment. Hence it's called experimental research. So it looks at data that's capable of being verified by observation or experiment. There's nothing abstract here. This is practical research. It's experimental research. The main characteristics of this research is that variables under study is under the control of the researcher. So the researcher picks what's been studied and looks at the relationship between the various parts of the experiment or the various parts of the inquiry and sees how they are connected. So the researcher is very important in forming the linkages between the various parts. And that's the overview of what we've just been saying. The distinction between conceptual and empirical research. Now, the steps in the empirical, well, design a working hypothesis or guess as to the probable results. So with empirical research, with this type of practical research, first of all set out what the hypothesis is. The hypothesis is the testable statement. A is linked to B. That's our hypothesis. So the hypothesis is A is linked to B. And then get enough facts, data, to prove or disprove the hypothesis. Get enough facts and say, test the look at the facts and do some analysis on the facts and say, well, A is not linked to B. The hypothesis is rejected. Or it's found that A is linked to B. Well, maybe that can be tested more in the future, but for the moment, the hypothesis seems to stand up. Set experimental designs, which researchers think will manipulate the persons or the materials concerned so as to bring forth the desired information. So, having got the hypothesis and having picked up the data, set up the experimental design. How is the data going to be linked one part to the next? Look at the various relationships that are possible and try and link those. Try and link them back to the hypothesis. Look at the various relationships between the data and come up with an experimental design which is robust and which will enable testing the facts to see if the hypothesis is correct or not correct. So empirical research is appropriate when proof is sought that certain variables affect other variables in some way. So if we're looking to see if something affects something else, that's empirical, tested. And that's one type of research. As I said earlier, there are many types. There's fundamental research, which is looking at abstract ideas and looking at relationships perhaps in mathematics. But if you're looking at empirical research, you're looking at linkages between some phenomenon and some other phenomenon to see if one is affecting the other. That's empirical. We've also got exploratory and formalized research. The objective of exploratory research is the development of hypotheses rather than testing. It's exploring the research, exploring the phenomena to come up with hypotheses. We may know that every time something happens, something else happens. They always come together. Two parts come together. Something happens, then something else happens. Why? So come up with a hypothesis linking them. The hypothesis may be that when something happens under the following conditions, something else happens. So we're looking at what are those conditions. Whereas formalized research studies, formalized research studies, I should say, are those with substantial structure and with specific hypotheses to be tested. Formalized research is much more rigorous. It's much more set out. It's much more described. Formalized research is there is a model, and the model is being tested. It's formalized, and it's going to be tested using the following techniques. It's formalized. Exploratory is trying to find the hypothesis. It's exploring the relationships to try and find out what's going on. Formalized is saying something happens, something else happens, here is the relationship, tested. So it gives the hypothesis. It's not exploring for the hypothesis, it gives the hypothesis and then goes and tests it. In this class we've looked at different types of research. We've contrasted different types of research, and these will come up in readings in different subject areas. We constantly come across the idea of empirical research, and now we have the ideas of formalized and exploratory research and descriptive research, and We have all sorts of ideas about different types of research, and this is important. It's important to realize that there are many different types. And we've looked at the essential characteristics of each of these types in this class. So it's worth going back over the class, running it again, using the wind forward and wind backward function on the video, stop the video and make notes, and then go and research the various types of research, the types of research, by going online and seeing if you can come up with other ideas about these various types of research. But that's all I'm going to do in this session. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to say thank you for watching.